The sound was not just a bark. It was a rhythmic, desperate thunder that shook the floorboards of the master bedroom. It was 3 in the morning. Lucas stared at the ceiling, his eyes burning with exhaustion. The shadows of the oak tree outside danced across the plaster, mimicking the chaos unfolding in the basement below. He rolled over, checking the glowing green numbers on his alarm clock, hoping against hope that silence would reclaim the house. But the barking did not stop. It was relentless, a guttural sound that spoke of panic and obsession. "Max, enough!" Lucas shouted, his voice hoarse. Silence followed for a heartbeat, just long enough for Lucas to exhale before it started again. Louder this time, more frantic. This was not the behavior of the dog he knew. Max, his 5-year-old golden retriever, was the kind of dog that thieves could step over while robbing the house. He was a creature of comfort, usually found curled up on the rug or chasing tennis balls, with a lazy, loping gait at the local park. But ever since they had moved into the house on Elm Street, in the quiet suburbs of Ohio, Max had changed. Lucas threw the duvet off his legs and sat up. The cold air of the old house bit at his skin. He had bought the place 2 weeks ago, a fixer-upper built in the 1950s. It was a solid brick structure with good bones, or so the realtor had promised. It was supposed to be a fresh start for him, a chance to rebuild his life after a messy breakup and a career shift that had left his bank account draining faster than he liked to admit. He grabbed his robe and trudged into the hallway. The hardwood floors creaked under his weight, a familiar symphony of unsettling house. But beneath the creaks, the barking continued, echoing up from the depths of the basement like a distress signal. Lucas opened the basement door. The smell hit him first, that specific scent of subterranean dampness, old dust, and the metallic tang of the furnace. He flicked the light switch. The single, naked bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered to life, casting long, swinging shadows against the concrete walls. "Max, come here, boy!" At the bottom of the stairs, standing in a corner that was usually shrouded in darkness, was Max. The dog's golden coat was bristled, his ears pinned back against his skull. He was facing the north wall, a stretch of painted brick that looked no different from the rest of the foundation. Max barked again, his whole body lurching forward with the force of it. He wasn't barking at a rat or a spider. He was barking directly at the center of the wall, his nose inches from the rough red surface. Lucas descended the stairs, his bare feet recoiling against the cold concrete. "Max, hey, look at me!" He reached out to touch the dog's collar, but Max flinched, letting out a low, vibrating growl. Lucas froze. Max had never growled at him, not once. The dog's eyes were wide, the whites showing in a look of pure terror mixed with aggression. "It's okay, buddy, it's just a wall," Lucas whispered, crouching down. He placed a hand firmly on the dog's flank. Max was trembling, his muscles coiled tight as steel springs. Lucas looked at the wall. He saw nothing. No cracks, no movement, no signs of pests. He pressed his ear against the cold brick, listening for the scratching of mice or the scuttling of roaches. Nothing. Just the heavy silence of the earth pressing against the foundation. "Come on," Lucas said, using his body weight to steer the 80-pound dog away. "Upstairs. Now." It took nearly 10 minutes of coaxing and dragging to get Max up the stairs. The moment the basement door clicked shut, the dog collapsed onto the kitchen floor, panting heavily, his tongue lolling out. But his eyes remained fixed on the door, watching, waiting. The next morning brought no relief. The sun struggled to pierce through the overcast gray sky, typical of an Ohio autumn. Lucas sat at his kitchen table, nursing a mug of black coffee, watching Max. The dog was pacing in front of the basement door, whining softly. Lucas sighed and rubbed his temples. He had work to do. Freelance graphic design deadlines were looming, but his focus was shattered. He needed fresh air. He clipped the leash onto Max's collar and stepped out onto the porch. The neighborhood was picturesque in a faded, mid-century way. Large maple trees lined the streets, dropping leaves in shades of fire and gold. As they walked down the driveway, Lucas saw his neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Abernathy, raking leaves 2 houses down. Mr. Abernathy was a fixture of the street, a man who seemed to have been born wearing a flannel shirt and suspenders. "Morning, Lucas," the old man called out, leaning on his rake. "Morning, Mr. Abernathy," Lucas replied, forcing a smile. Max tugged at the leash, surprisingly eager to greet the neighbor, his tail finally offering a tentative wag. "Rough night?" Mr. Abernathy asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Heard the commotion. Sounded like you were running a kennel over there." Lucas felt a flush of embarrassment. "I am so sorry. I hope we didn't wake you." Max has been adjusting poorly to the move. Mr. Abernathy looked from Lucas to the dog, his expression shifting from friendly to something more guarded. "Adjusting, huh? Is he barking at the yard? Squirrels? No, Lucas admitted, looking down at Max, who was now sniffing Mr. Abernathy's boots. The basement. Specifically one wall in the basement. He won't leave it alone. The old man's smile evaporated completely. He gripped the handle of his rake tighter, his knuckles turning white. The wind rustled the dry leaves around them, filling the sudden silence. Which wall? Mr. Abernathy asked, his voice lower. The north wall. The one facing the backyard, Lucas said, frowning. Why? Mr. Abernathy took a slow breath, looking past Lucas toward the house. It stood stoic and silent, its windows like dark eyes watching them. You know Arthur lived there for 40 years before he went away. Arthur? The previous owner? Lucas asked. The realtor said he moved to a retirement home in Florida. Mr. Abernathy let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Florida. Is that what they told you? Arthur didn't go to Florida, son. Arthur just vanished. One day he was tending his roses, the next day the house was empty. Police came, looked around, found nothing, said he must have skipped town. But Arthur wasn't the type to skip. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind ran down Lucas's spine. What are you saying? I am saying that house has secrets, Mr. Abernathy said, stepping back. And animals. They know. They see things we don't. If that dog is telling you something is wrong with that wall, you best listen. Or better yet, you pack up and leave it be. It's just an old house, Mr. Abernathy, Lucas said, trying to sound rational, though his heart was beating faster. Probably just rats in the insulation. Arthur didn't have rats, the old man muttered, turning back to his leaves. Arthur had regrets. Lucas returned to the house with a heavy feeling in his gut. Regrets. It was the kind of cryptic nonsense small-town neighbors loved to spout to scare the newcomers. He tried to dismiss it as he unclipped Max's leash in the kitchen, but the moment the metal clip snapped open, Max didn't run to his water bowl. He bolted. Claws scrabbled frantically on the linoleum as he slid into the hallway and threw himself at the basement door. He slammed his front paws against the wood, whining, scratching, desperate to get back down. Max, stop! Lucas grabbed the dog by the collar, but Max was stronger than he looked. The dog twisted, letting out a sharp yelp, and managed to nose the door handle. The latch, old and loose, gave way. Max tumbled down the stairs in a blur of gold fur. Max! Lucas ran after him, his hand slapping the light switch. When he reached the bottom, the scene broke his heart. Max was at the north wall again, but he wasn't just barking now. He was digging. He was clawing at the concrete floor where it met the brick wall and scratching at the bricks themselves. Max, no! Lucas lunged forward. He saw the blood before he registered what was happening. Max's claws were torn. Bright red smears stained the grey mortar of the bricks. The dog was hurting himself, tearing his own paws apart in a frantic attempt to get through the solid barrier. Stop it! Stop it right now! Lucas wrapped his arms around the dog's chest, hauling him back. Max thrashed, snapping at the air, his eyes wild and dilated. It took every ounce of Lucas's strength to drag him away, the dog's paws leaving bloody streaks on the floor. He hauled Max upstairs and slammed the basement door, engaging the deadbolt he had installed just days ago. He dragged Max into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa, pulling the dog into his lap. Max was shaking violently. Lucas examined his paws. The pads were raw, 2 of the nails split down the middle. "Why are you doing this?" Lucas whispered, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. He grabbed the first aid kit from the bathroom and began the slow, painful process of cleaning the wounds. Max whimpered but allowed it, his head resting heavily on Lucas's knee. As he bandaged the paws, Lucas thought about Mr. Abernathy's words. Arthur didn't have rats. Arthur had regrets. This wasn't normal. This wasn't rats. Rats scuttled. They made noise. The wall was silent. And yet, Max, a dog who was terrified of thunder and vacuum cleaners, was willing to tear himself apart to get to whatever was behind those bricks. Lucas looked at the clock. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but he felt like he had been awake for days. He couldn't keep doing this. He couldn't watch his best friend destroy himself. He stood up, his resolve hardening. He walked to the kitchen and stared at the basement door. The scratching had started again, softer this time, muffled by the bandages, but persistent. Max was back at the door, limping, pleading. "Okay," Lucas said aloud to the empty room. "Okay." If he couldn't stop the dog, he had to remove the obsession. He had to prove to Max, and perhaps to himself, that there was nothing there, just dirt and old pipes. Lucas went to the garage. The air inside was stale, smelling of gasoline and sawdust. He walked past the boxes of unpacked books and kitchenware to the workbench he had set up. There, hanging on the pegboard, was a 4-pound sledgehammer. He weighed it in his hand. It was heavy, cold, and destructive. He wasn't a superstitious man. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in structural engineering and plumbing diagrams. But as he walked back into the house, the sledgehammer gripping his hand like a weapon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to cross a line. He opened the basement door. Max looked up at him, tail giving a single, hopeful thump against the floor. "Let's go," Lucas said softly. They went down together. The basement felt colder than before. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. Lucas stood before the north wall. He ran his hand over the bricks one last time. They felt solid, immovable. "You better be right about this, buddy," Lucas muttered. He stepped back, widened his stance, and raised the sledgehammer. Max sat down a few feet away, silent for the first time in 24 hours, his eyes locked on the striking point. He knew. Lucas took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and swung with everything he had. The impact was jarring. The steel head of the sledgehammer connected with the painted brick, sending a shockwave up Lucas's arms that rattled his teeth. A cloud of red dust and white mortar puffed into the air, instantly stinging his eyes and coating his throat with the taste of chalk. Max did not flinch. The dog sat 3 feet away, his bandaged paws resting gingerly on the cold concrete, his dark eyes fixed on the point of impact, with an intensity that was almost human. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply watched, as if he were supervising a necessary surgery. Lucas coughed, waving the dust away from his face. The first swing had left only a white pockmark on the red paint. The house was built in the 1950s, back when they built things to survive nuclear fallout. These weren't decorative facings. This was solid structural masonry. "This is crazy," Lucas muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. "I'm losing my mind. I'm destroying my own house because my dog barked at a wall." He looked at Max. The dog let out a soft, low sound, not quite a growl, but a vibration in his chest that seemed to say, "Keep going." Lucas grit his teeth and swung again, and again. The rhythm took over. Clang, crack, dust. Clang, crack, dust. For 20 minutes, the only sounds in the basement were the violent strikes of metal on stone and Lucas's ragged breathing. His shoulders burned. Blisters began to form on his palms, hot and stinging against the rubber grip of the hammer. Then the sound changed. Instead of the solid, dull thud of striking a foundational mass, the hammer hit with a hollow tock. Lucas froze, the hammer poised in midair. The sound was unmistakable to anyone who had ever knocked on a wall to find a stud. Behind this specific section of brick, there was no earth, there was empty space. He lowered the hammer slowly. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He looked at Max. The dog had stood up. His tail gave a slow, uncertain wag. "You knew," Lucas whispered. He abandoned the sledgehammer and grabbed a cold chisel and a heavy mallet from his tool belt. He knelt on the debris-covered floor, ignoring the sharp grit biting into his knees. He placed the chisel point into the mortar line surrounding the center brick, the one that had sounded hollow. Tap, tap, crack. The old mortar, dried out over 6 decades, gave way easier than the brick itself. Lucas worked with surgical precision now, chipping away the binding agent until the rectangular block was loose. He wiggled it with his fingers. It shifted. With a grunt of effort, he pulled. The brick slid out with a grinding noise, heavy and rough in his hands. He set it aside and peered into the dark rectangular hole he had created. A draft of air hit his face. It didn't smell like mold or rot, which is what he had expected from a sealed space. It smelled old. It carried the scent of dry paper, leather, and something sweet like dried lavender. "Okay," Lucas said, his voice trembling slightly. "Okay." He pulled out a pocket flashlight and clicked it on, shining the beam into the void. It wasn't a large room or a secret tunnel. It was a small, deliberate cavity, perhaps 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep, carved out of the foundation before the wall had been sealed up. It was a time capsule, hidden in the skeleton of the house. Sitting in the center of this dusty alcove was a single object. It was a metal lunchbox, the kind from the mid-20th century, with a domed lid and a rusted metal latch. The paint had peeled away in flakes, leaving it a mottled gray and brown, but it was intact. Lucas reached in. His hand brushed against spiderwebs that disintegrated at his touch. He gripped the handle of the box. It was heavy, much heavier than an empty tin box should be. He pulled it out, the metal scraping against the bottom of the brickwork. As soon as the box hit the basement floor, Max moved. The dog limped forward, sniffing the rusted metal intensely, but the aggression was gone. The frantic, wall-scratching panic had evaporated. Max let out a long, high-pitched whine and rested his chin on the box, his tail tucking between his legs. It was a gesture of mourning. Lucas sat back on his heels, staring at the object. The reality of the situation washed over him. Mr. Abernathy was right. This wasn't about rats. Someone had hidden this here. Someone had built a wall to protect it. "Let's go upstairs," Lucas said quietly. He didn't want to open it down here in the dark. He carried the box like it was a bomb, cradling it with both hands. Max followed close at his heels, shadowing his every step. In the kitchen, the harsh fluorescent light made the box look even more ancient. Lucas placed it on the dining table, on top of yesterday's newspaper. The contrast between the rusted relic and the modern headlines was stark. He went to the sink and washed his hands, scrubbing away the red brick dust, giving himself a moment to breathe. He was delaying it. He knew he was delaying it. Whatever was in that box had been powerful enough to reach through time and brick to distress his dog. He returned to the table. He took a flathead screwdriver and wedged it under the rusted latch. The metal protested with a screech that made his teeth ache. But finally, with a sharp pop, the mechanism gave way. Lucas took a deep breath and lifted the lid. The smell of the past billowed out. Old paper, cedar shavings, and the unmistakable scent of a dog. Inside, the items were packed with meticulous care. On top lay a collar. It was made of thick red leather, now cracked and stiff with age. The brass buckle was tarnished green. Suspended from the D-ring was a simple metal tag, engraved by hand, the letters crooked and deep. Lucas leaned in to read it. Buddy. Beneath the collar was a rubber ball. It was not the bright neon yellow of modern tennis balls, but a solid, heavy red rubber, miraculously preserved in the dark, airtight space. And beneath the toys lay a book. It was a composition notebook with a black and white marbled cover, the corners soft and frayed. Underneath the notebook was a thick envelope, yellowed and brittle. Lucas picked up the notebook first. His hands were shaking. He opened the cover. On the first page, in neat, cursive handwriting, the kind they forced children to practice for hours in the 1950s, was an inscription. Property of Arthur V. Miller, age 12. Keep out, Arthur. The neighbor, Mr. Abernathy, had mentioned Arthur. He said Arthur had lived here for 40 years before vanishing, but this was from when Arthur was a child. Lucas turned the page. The entries were dated from 1955. He started reading. October 12th, 1955. Dad says Buddy has to go. He says he eats too much and we can't afford him anymore. He says a dog is a mouth we don't need, but Buddy is my only friend. I heard Dad talking to Mr. Henderson about the farm. I know what the farm means. It means they take them behind the barn and they don't come back. I won't let him take Buddy. Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. He looked down at Max, who was sitting under the table, his head resting on Lucas's foot. The connection was palpable. A boy fighting for his dog. He turned a few pages, skimming through the entries. They were a chronicle of fear and planning. The boy, Arthur, was terrified of his father, a man described as hard as the brick he lays. Arthur was planning to run away. He was saving everything he could. November 3rd, 1955. I have been stealing from Dad's jar. He drinks too much to notice. I have $20 now. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to hide it all in the wall in the basement where Dad is building the new pantry. He makes me mix the mortar. I know how to leave a space. When I have enough, I'm going to come back for it. Get Buddy, and we are going to go to California. I saw a picture of California. It never snows there. Lucas put the diary down. His heart was aching. The hidden compartment wasn't a professional safe. It was a desperate hiding spot engineered by a 12-year-old boy right under his abusive father's nose. He reached for the yellowed envelope. It was thick, heavy. He opened the flap. Inside was a stack of paper currency, but it wasn't just $20. Lucas pulled out the bills. They were small-sized banknotes, mostly $10 and $20 bills, but there were many of them. He fanned them out. They were silver certificates and Federal Reserve notes from the 1940s and 50s. He counted them quickly. 500, 1,000, 2,000. It was nearly $5,000. In 1955, $5,000 was a fortune. It was the price of a house. It was a life-changing amount of money. Where did a 12-year-old get $5,000? Lucas whispered. He went back to the diary, flipping toward the end. The handwriting in the final entries was rushed, jagged, panic-stricken. December 20th, 1955. I found it. I found Dad's stash. Not the jar, the box under the floorboards in the attic, the money he stole from the union. I heard him yelling at Mum about it, saying the police were asking questions. He said they'd never find it, but I found it. I took it. All of it. If he is going to kill Buddy, I am going to take his life away. I am putting it in the wall with Buddy's things. Tonight is the night. I am taking Buddy and we are going. I will come back for the money when it is safe. I promise, Buddy. We are going to be free. That was the last entry. Lucas stared at the page. The boy had stolen his father's illicit hoard. money that was likely the result of a crime, to fund his escape with his dog. He had hidden it in the wall intending to retrieve it later, but the wall had been sealed, the brick had been painted, and 60 years had passed. Arthur had lived in this house until he was an old man. Mr. Abernathy said he had lived here for 40 years. If Arthur stayed, why was the money still here? Why were the toys still here? If Arthur never left, what happened to Buddy? A cold realization washed over Lucas. The story wasn't about a successful escape. It was about a failure. Arthur hadn't come back for the money because he couldn't. Or maybe he did come back, but he couldn't get to it. Lucas picked up the single folded sheet of paper that had been at the very bottom of the box, separate from the diary. It wasn't in an envelope. It looked different. The paper was newer, perhaps from the 1990s. He unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as the diary, but shaky, the script of an old man. To whoever finds this, my name is Arthur. If you are reading this, I am gone. For 40 years I walked past this wall every day. For 40 years I couldn't bring myself to break it down. I was a coward. I stayed in this house, trapped by the memory of what happened that night. My father caught us. He stopped us before we even made it to the driveway. Lucas stopped reading, his vision blurring. He wiped his eyes. The silence of the kitchen was heavy, suffocating. Max nudged his hand, sensing the shift in his owner's emotions. He forced himself to continue. He took Buddy. He told me if I ever told anyone about the money, he would hurt Mom. So I stayed silent. I let him seal the wall the next day. I watched him brick up my hope, my freedom, and my best friend's memory. I grew up. I grew old. And I inherited this house of misery. I never spent the money. I couldn't touch it. It was blood money. It was the price of my dog's life. But I am dying now. The doctors say I don't have long. I have no family, no children. I have no one to leave this to, so I am leaving it to the house, or rather to the next person who loves a dog enough to listen. If you found this, it means you broke the wall. It means you listened. The money is yours. But the money is not the treasure. The treasure is the map underneath the liner of this box. Lucas frowned. He looked at the metal lunchbox. He hadn't seen a map. He reached into the empty tin and dug his fingernails under the cardboard liner at the bottom. It lifted. Beneath the false bottom lay a certificate. It wasn't a map in the traditional sense. It was a stock certificate. International Business Machines Corporation, 100 shares. Dated 1955. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. He knew enough about finance to know what this was. IBM. The blue chip of blue chips. He looked back at the letter. I didn't just hide the stolen cash. I took $500 of it in 1955 and bought shares in a company my uncle said was the future. I put the certificate in the box and forgot about it. I never cashed the dividends. I never split the stock. I let it grow just like the grief grew in my heart. The cash is for your trouble. The stock, that is for your dog. Give him the life Buddy never had. Lucas dropped the letter. His hands were trembling so violently he could barely hold the paper. He looked at the stock certificate. 100 shares in 1955, with stock splits and dividend reinvestment over 60 years. This wasn't $5,000. This wasn't $50,000. He was holding millions. He looked at Max. The dog was looking at the red rubber ball on the table, his tail giving a soft thump, thump against the floor. Max, Lucas whispered, his voice cracking. You didn't just find a ball, Buddy. You just saved our lives. But as the euphoria of the discovery began to rise, a sudden, sharp sound cut through the air. It was the front doorbell. Lucas froze. No one came to his house. He didn't have friends in town yet. He wasn't expecting a package. He looked at the clock. It was nearly 5 in the evening. The light outside was fading. He walked to the hallway, stepping over the debris of his own panic. He peered through the peephole. Standing on his porch was a man in a dark suit. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a police officer. Lucas's heart stopped. The man in the suit raised his hand and knocked again, sharp, authoritative. Mr. Lucas Miller, a voice called out, muffled by the door. We need to speak with you regarding the property of the late Arthur Miller. There has been a complication with the will. Lucas looked back at the kitchen table, where the fortune lay spread out in plain sight. Lucas stared at the fortune spread across his kitchen table, the rusted metal box, the brittle yellowed envelopes, the leather collar, and the stock certificate that represented a life entirely different from the one he was currently living. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, a sustained electronic chime that sliced through the silence of the house like a knife. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his system. He looked at the peephole's distorted view of the hallway one more time. The police officer shifted his weight, his hand resting near his belt, while the man in the suit checked his watch with an air of impatient entitlement. Just a minute, Lucas yelled, his voice cracking slightly. He turned back to the table. He could not let them see this. If the house was in legal contention, if the sale was being challenged, any assets found on the property could be frozen, seized, or tied up in litigation for years. Or worse, if the money was considered proceeds of a crime committed 60 years ago, it could be confiscated entirely. He grabbed the kitchen towel he had used to dry his hands and threw it over the papers, but it wasn't enough. It looked like exactly what it was, a pile of secrets hidden under a rag. "Think, Lucas, think," he hissed at himself. He grabbed the metal lunchbox and shoved the cash, the diary, and the stock certificate back inside. The metal groaned as he forced the lid down. He looked around frantically for a hiding spot. The kitchen cabinets, too obvious, the oven, too cliché. His eyes landed on the bag of dog food in the corner, a large 40-pound sack of kibble that was half empty. He rushed over, unrolled the top of the bag, and shoved the metal box deep into the dry brown pellets. He pushed it down until his elbow was covered in dog food, burying the treasure beneath layers of processed grain. He rolled the bag shut and kicked it back into the corner, just as the fist pounded on the door again. "Mr. Miller! Police! Open up!" Lucas took a deep breath, smoothed his shirt, and ran a hand through his messy hair. He looked at Max. The dog was standing by the kitchen archway, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Stay here, Max. Stay," Lucas commanded softly. He walked to the front door, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just 3 inches, keeping his foot firmly planted behind it. "Can I help you?" Lucas asked, trying to project a calm he did not feel. The man in the suit stepped forward. He was in his late 40s, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Lucas's car. His hair was slicked back and his eyes were the color of flint, hard, cold, and assessing. "Mr. Lucas Miller?" the man asked. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. "That is me. I am Julian Thorne, attorney at law representing the estate of the Miller family. This is Officer Reynolds." Thorne gestured to the uniformed man behind him, who gave a curt nod. "We apologize for the intrusion, but this is a matter of some urgency." "The Miller family?" Lucas frowned. "I bought this house from the bank. I was told Arthur Miller had no living relatives." "That was the initial assumption, yes," Thorne said, a thin, tight smile touching his lips. "However, a nephew has recently come forward, a Mr. Elias Miller. He is contesting the validity of the deed transfer, citing mental incompetence on the part of his late uncle during the time the property was seized by the bank." Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. "Excuse me? I have the title, I have the keys, the closing was 2 weeks ago. You can't just show up here and—" "Actually, we can," Thorne interrupted, pulling a folded document from his inside pocket. "This is a temporary injunction granted by the county court this afternoon. It freezes all assets related to the property pending a probate hearing. It also grants us the right to inspect the premises to inventory any historical family assets that may have been inadvertently included in the sale." Lucas gripped the edge of the door until his knuckles turned white. "Assets? You mean my furniture?" "We mean heirlooms, Mr. Miller. Documents. Personal effects of Arthur Miller," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing as he tried to look past Lucas into the hallway. "We have reason to believe that valuable family property remains inside." Lucas's mind raced. They knew. Somehow, they knew. They weren't here for the house. They were here for the box. But how? Arthur had hidden it 60 years ago. "I have done some renovations," Lucas said, his voice hardening. "The house was empty when I got here, just trash and old furniture." "Is that so?" Thorne asked. He took a step closer, invading Lucas's personal space. "We received a report of significant noise coming from this address over the last 24 hours. Hammering, construction. Are you destroying structural elements of the house, Mr. Miller? Because under the injunction that would be a felony." The police officer stepped forward. "Sir, if you are altering the property while it is under dispute, we are going to have a problem. We need to come in and verify the condition of the home." Lucas knew his rights, or at least he thought he did. "Do you have a warrant? Because an injunction isn't a search warrant." Thorne's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "We have a court order for inventory." "Then you can schedule an appointment," Lucas said, his adrenaline sharpening his focus. "I will contact my lawyer in the morning. Until then, you are trespassing on private property." He started to close the door, but Thorne's hand shot out, stopping it. For a moment, the veneer of the polished lawyer vanished, replaced by something desperate and aggressive. "Listen to me, you little squatter," Thorne hissed, his voice dropping so the officer couldn't hear. "I know what is in this house. Arthur was a senile old fool, but he wrote letters. If you have found it and you try to keep it, I will bury you in so much litigation you will be paying me legal fees in your next life." Suddenly, a ferocious roar erupted from behind Lucas. Max launched himself at the gap in the door, barking with a savagery that Lucas had never heard before. His teeth snapped inches from Thorn's hand. Thorn recoiled violently, stumbling back off the porch step and nearly falling into the rose bushes. "Control your animal," he shrieked, losing his composure entirely. Lucas grabbed Max by the collar, holding the 80-pound dog back. "He is protective," Lucas said, his heart racing. "And he doesn't like threats. Get off my porch now." He slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. He leaned his back against the wood, sliding down until he hit the floor. His legs were shaking. Max was still barking at the wood, the hackles on his back standing straight up. "It's okay, Max, it's okay," Lucas whispered, though he knew it wasn't. Thorn wasn't looking for a family heirloom. He was looking for the money. The nephew was likely a convenient fiction or a co-conspirator. Arthur's letter had mentioned his father's stolen money. If Thorn knew about the stolen money, this wasn't just a civil case. This was dangerous. Lucas scrambled to his feet. He needed answers. He couldn't trust the internet, and he couldn't trust the police if Thorn had them in his pocket. He needed the one person who knew the history of this street. Lucas ran to the kitchen, grabbed the bag of dog food with the box inside, and hoisted it onto his shoulder. It was heavy and awkward. He couldn't leave it here. If they came back with a real warrant while he was sleeping, they would find it. "Come on, Max, back door." They slipped out the rear entrance into the darkening backyard. The air was crisp and cold. Lucas navigated through the overgrown hedges that separated his yard from Mr. Abernathy's. He saw a light on in the neighbor's garage. The sound of a radio playing old jazz drifted through the evening air. Lucas hurried across the grass, Max trotting silently beside him. He knocked on the garage doorframe. Mr. Abernathy looked up from his workbench. He was sharpening a lawnmower blade, sparks flying in small arcs. He saw Lucas, disheveled, sweating, carrying a 40-pound bag of dog food, and turned off the grinder. "Well," the old man said, wiping his hands on a rag, "you look like you just robbed a bank, son." "I need help," Lucas said, breathless. "And I think I found out why Arthur vanished." Mr. Abernathy's eyes narrowed. He motioned for Lucas to come inside and close the garage door, shutting out the world. "Set it down," Abernathy said, pointing to a clear spot on the floor, "and tell me why there was a squad car in your driveway." Lucas explained everything. He told him about the barking, the wall, the hollow space, and the box. He didn't mention the exact amount of the money or the stock certificate yet. Caution was a new instinct he was learning fast. But he told him about the diary and the letter from Arthur. When he described Julian Thorn, Mr. Abernathy's face went pale. The old man sat down heavily on a wooden stool, letting out a long, shuddering sigh. "Thorn," Abernathy muttered. "I haven't heard that name in 20 years, but I should have known. Bad blood doesn't die. It just waits." "Who is he?" Lucas asked. "He said he represents Arthur's nephew, Elias." "Elias isn't Arthur's nephew," Abernathy spat. "Elias is the son of Arthur's older brother, Frank. Frank was the one who helped their father do business. The father was a union boss in the 50s, corrupt as the day is long, stole from the pension funds, bullied the workers. Arthur was the gentle one, the mistake." Abernathy leaned forward, his eyes intense. "When Arthur's father died, Frank and his boy Elias tore that house apart looking for the retirement fund the old man was rumored to have stashed. They never found it. They beat Arthur. They threatened him. That is why Arthur became a recluse. He wasn't hiding from the world, Lucas. He was hiding from his own family. And Thorn? Thorn was Frank's lawyer. Dirty. If he is here, and he is talking about assets, it means they finally figured out that Arthur didn't spend the money. They think it is still there." Lucas looked at the bag of dog food. "It is still there. You found it," Abernathy whispered. It wasn't a question. Lucas nodded. "But it's not just cash. It's complicated. And now they are trying to take the house back." Mr. Abernathy stood up and walked over to a metal cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 small glasses. He poured them both a shot. "Listen to me carefully, Lucas," the old man said, his voice grave. "You are in a race now. Thorn can get an injunction, sure, but to overturn a deed he needs proof of incompetence or fraud. He is bluffing to get inside. He wants to find the cash before the legal system locks it down. If he finds it, that money disappears into his pocket, and you never see it again." "So what do I do?" Lucas asked. "I can't fight a lawyer. I have $300 in my checking account." "You don't fight him with money," Abernathy said. "You fight him with the truth. You said there was a diary? A letter?" "Yes." "Does it prove the money was stolen by the father?" "Yes." "Arthur wrote it all down." Abernathy smiled, a grim, toothy expression. then that money doesn't belong to the estate. It belongs to the victims of the pension fraud, or if the statute of limitations is up, it is just abandoned property found in a wall. But the stock, Lucas interrupted. Arthur used some of the money to buy stock. In his own name. Abernathy paused, the glass halfway to his lips. Stock? IBM, from 1955. Abernathy choked on his drink. He coughed, staring at Lucas with wide eyes. IBM? From 55? Do you have any idea? I have a rough idea, Lucas said. Millions. The silence in the garage was deafening. Even Max seemed to sense the gravity of the word, lifting his head to look at them. If Thorne finds out about the stock, Abernathy said quietly, he won't just sue you. He will burn that house down to get it. That certificate is a bearer instrument effectively. If he gets his hands on it and destroys the diary proving Arthur's intent, he wins. He won't get it, Lucas said, a newfound fierce determination rising in his chest. Arthur left it to me. He left it to the one who saves the dog. I am not letting a vulture take it. Good, Abernathy said, but you can't stay there tonight. If Thorne is desperate, he won't wait for morning. He will come back, and he won't bring a police officer next time. Lucas felt a chill run through him. You think he would break in? I think a man looking for millions of dollars will do whatever is necessary, Abernathy replied. You and Max are staying here, in the guest room. We are going to put that truck of yours in the backyard behind the shed so it looks like you left town. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, the old man said, patting Max on the head. Arthur was my friend. I couldn't save him from his family. Maybe I can help save you. They set to work. Lucas moved his truck, covering it with a tarp. They brought the bag of dog food into Abernathy's secure basement, a space filled with woodworking tools and the smell of sawdust, far more welcoming than Lucas's own cellar. As they settled in for the night, Lucas sat on the edge of the guest bed, the metal box on his lap. He took out the diary again. He needed to understand Arthur. He needed to find a weakness in the family that Thorne represented. He flipped to the middle of the notebook, to a page he hadn't read yet. July 4th, 1956. I saw Frank today. He was driving a new car. He laughed at me when I was walking, buddy. He told me that one day he would own everything Dad built, and I would be lucky to be his gardener. He doesn't know. He doesn't know that I hold the power. I have the ledger. Lucas stopped reading. The ledger. He scanned the rest of the entry. I didn't just take the cash. I took the little black book from the box, the one with the names, the judges, the cops, the people Dad paid off. I hid it separately. If they ever hurt Buddy, I will give the book to the FBI. Lucas looked up, his heart racing again. There was something else hidden, not in the box. Separately, the ledger, Lucas whispered. If that ledger still existed, it might contain the proof that the family's wealth, the wealth Thorne and the nephew were fighting for, was built on corruption. It was leverage. But where was it? Lucas looked at Max. The dog was asleep on the rug, twitching, chasing dream rabbits. Max, Lucas said softly, we have one more thing to find. But before he could formulate a plan, a sound shattered the night. It wasn't a doorbell this time. It was the sound of glass breaking, loud, violent, and close. Lucas ran to the window of the guest room which faced his own house next door. Through the darkness and the trees, he saw the beam of a flashlight slicing through his living room. They were inside. The sound of shattering glass was followed by the heavy, dull thud of a boot, kicking open a door. From the darkened window of Mr. Abernathy's guest room, Lucas watched in paralyzed silence as the beam of a flashlight sliced through the living room of his home next door. The intruders were not being subtle. They were tearing the place apart. Lucas could hear the crash of furniture being overturned, the ripping of drywall, and the angry shouts of men who were running out of time. They are destroying it, Lucas whispered, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. They are going to tear the house down to the studs. Mr. Abernathy stood beside him, peering through the blinds. The old man's face was grim, illuminated only by the faint street lamp outside. He turned and walked to his closet, reaching to the top shelf. He pulled down a heavy, rectangular case. Thorne is desperate, Abernathy said, his voice low and steady. He knows that if he doesn't find that money tonight, the injunction won't matter. He needs physical possession of the assets before the courts open tomorrow. Abernathy opened the case on the bed. Inside lay an old double-barreled shotgun, broken open to reveal the empty chambers. He began to load 2 red shells with calm, practiced movements. Mr. Abernathy, we can't shoot them, Lucas said, alarmed. That is a lawyer and a police officer. That is a criminal and his accomplice committing a felony break-in, Abernathy corrected, snapping the barrel shut. But you are right. We don't want a shootout. We want leverage. You said there was a ledger? Lucas nodded, his mind racing back to the diary entry he had just read. I hid it separately. If they ever hurt Buddy, I will give the book to the FBI. Where is it, Lucas? Abernathy asked. If we have that book, Thorne has no teeth. That ledger proves his client's claim to the estate is built on stolen funds. It proves the heirloom they are looking for is proceeds of a crime. Lucas closed his eyes, trying to think like a 12-year-old boy in 1955. A boy who was terrified of his father. A boy who loved his dog more than anything in the world. Buddy's sanctuary. The doghouse, Lucas said, his eyes snapping open. What? In the backyard, Lucas explained, pointing toward the overgrown garden behind his house. There is a pile of rotting wood in the far corner, near the old oak tree. I thought it was just trash, but the shape, it's the remains of a doghouse. Arthur wouldn't hide the insurance policy in the house where his father could find it. He would hide it in the one place his father never went, Buddy's house. Abernathy looked out the window toward the backyard. The flashlights were still focused inside the main house. The yard was pitch black. You have a window, Abernathy said, checking his watch. Maybe 5 minutes before they realize the box isn't inside and move to the outbuildings. I am going, Lucas said. He looked down at Max. The dog was standing alert, his ears swiveling toward the noise next door. Max, stay, Max whined, stepping forward and pressing his chest against Lucas's leg. He won't stay, Abernathy said softly, and you might need him. If that ledger is buried, he will find it faster than you. Lucas took a deep breath. The adrenaline was making his hands shake, but his mind was strangely clear. Okay, we go together. I will cover you from the back porch, Abernathy said, hefting the shotgun. And I am calling the state police, not the local precinct. Thorne has them in his pocket, the state troopers, but they will take 20 minutes to get here. You need to be faster. The night air was freezing, biting through Lucas's flannel shirt as they slipped out of Abernathy's back door. The grass was wet with dew, soaking his sneakers instantly. They moved in a crouch, hugging the line of the thick privet hedge that separated the two properties. Max was in his element. He moved with a silent, predatory grace, his body low to the ground. He didn't bark. He seemed to understand the stakes. They reached the gap in the hedge. Lucas paused. The house loomed to his left, glowing with the erratic movement of the intruder's flashlights. He could hear Thorne's voice, shrill and angry. It has to be here. Check the vents. Tear up the floorboards. Lucas signaled Max, and they darted across the open lawn toward the shadow of the great oak tree. The darkness here was absolute. They reached the pile of debris. It was a sad sight. Collapsed wood, rusted nails, and 60 years of decay. Lucas dropped to his knees, his hands frantically feeling through the wet, rotting timber. Find it, Max, Lucas whispered desperately. Find it. Max sniffed the debris. He circled the pile once, then twice. Suddenly, he stopped at the rear of the structure, where the wood had rotted away to reveal the earth beneath. He began to dig. It wasn't the frantic, panicked digging of the basement. This was precise, focused. Lucas joined him, scooping away the wet soil with his bare hands. The dirt was cold and packed hard. His fingernails tore, but he didn't stop. 3 inches down, nothing. 6 inches down, his fingers brushed against something hard and smooth. It wasn't a rock. It was glass. Got it, Lucas gasped. He pulled. The suction of the mud held tight for a moment, and then with a wet pop, the object came free. It was a mason jar. The lid was rusted shut and sealed with what looked like candle wax, dipped over and over to create a waterproof barrier. Inside, pressed against the glass, was a small black notebook. Hey! The shout came from the back porch of Lucas's house. Lucas froze. A beam of light hit him, blindingly bright. He is in the yard. He has got something. It was the police officer, Reynolds. Run! Lucas yelled to Max, but there was nowhere to run. Reynolds was already vaulting the porch railing, his hand on his holster. Thorne appeared in the doorway, his suit covered in drywall dust, his face twisted in a mask of fury. Stop right there! Reynolds screamed, drawing his weapon. Lucas stood up slowly, clutching the muddy jar to his chest. Max stood in front of him, letting out a low, menacing growl that vibrated in the night air. It's over, Thorne! Lucas shouted, his voice trembling but loud. I have the ledger. Arthur's ledger. Thorne froze halfway down the porch steps. The color drained from his face, visible even in the harsh light of the flashlight. What did you say? The black book, Lucas yelled, holding the jar up. The names, the judges, the payoffs, the union funds. It is all in here. Arthur didn't just hide the money, he hid the evidence. Thorne's eyes darted from the jar to Reynolds. He is lying. Shoot the dog, get the jar. Reynolds hesitated. The gun wavered in his hand. Thorne, you said this was a probate issue. You didn't say anything about union ledgers. Do it! Thorne shrieked, his composure shattering. If that book gets out, we all lose. Do you think your name isn't in the legacy of this town's corruption? Your father was a deputy in '55, wasn't he? Reynolds lowered the gun slightly, uncertainty clouding his features. Officer, Lucas said, stepping forward, his voice gaining strength. This book goes to the FBI. If you are the one who turns it in, you are a witness. If you help him take it, you are an accessory to a 60-year-old racketeering conspiracy. Don't listen to him. Thorne lunged forward, not toward Lucas, but toward Max. He swung a heavy crowbar he had been carrying. Max! The blow never landed. A deafening boom tore through the night. Thorne stumbled back, dropping the crowbar, clutching his ears. A spray of dirt erupted from the ground 3 feet in front of him, where the shotgun blast had impacted the lawn. That was a warning! Mr. Abernathy's voice rang out from the darkness of the neighboring yard. He stepped into the light, the smoking shotgun leveled at Thorne's chest. The next one takes your knees off, Julian. Thorne fell to his knees, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The fight had left him. He looked at the jar in Lucas's hand with a mix of terror and defeat. Reynolds holstered his gun. He looked at Thorne, then at the jar, and finally at Abernathy's shotgun. He raised his hands in the air. I am done. I didn't sign up for this. In the distance, the wailing sirens of the state police grew louder, cutting through the silence of the suburbs. Lucas looked down at Max. The dog stopped growling. He looked up at Lucas, his tail giving a single, calm wag. He licked the mud off Lucas's hand. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, federal agents and news vans parked on the quiet street. The discovery of the Miller ledger became a national news story. It unraveled a web of corruption that had spanned decades, implicating local officials and vindicating the memory of Arthur Miller. Thorne was indicted on multiple counts of fraud, burglary, and attempted assault. The claim by the so-called nephew evaporated the moment the ledger came to light, but for Lucas the victory was quieter. It was a Tuesday morning 2 months later. The air was crisp, hinting at the coming winter. Lucas sat on his front porch, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. The house was silent. The holes in the drywall had been patched. The basement wall had been repaired, though Lucas had left the brick unpainted, a scar to remember the history. The stock certificate had been authenticated. The value was staggering. After taxes and legal fees, the IBM shares were worth over $3 million. Lucas looked out at the yard. A landscaping crew was there, planting a new garden. They were clearing the debris of the old doghouse and planting a bed of white roses in its place, Arthur's favorite. Hey, Mr. Abernathy called out, walking across the lawn. He looked younger, lighter, as if the lifting of the neighborhood's dark secret had taken years off his life. Morning, Mr. Abernathy, Lucas smiled. You getting ready for the trip? The old man asked. Yeah, Lucas said. Truck is packed. We are hitting the road tomorrow. California? California, Lucas nodded. Arthur wanted to take Buddy to see the ocean where it never snows. I figure it is the least I can do. He would have liked that, Abernathy said, his eyes misting over. He would have liked that a lot. Abernathy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small red rubber ball. Found this in my garage, must have rolled in there years ago. Thought Max might want it. Lucas took the ball. It was old, but solid. He whistled. Max! The golden retriever bounded out of the house, his tail a blur of motion. He looked healthy, his coat shiny, the scars on his paws fully healed. He saw Mr. Abernathy and barked, a happy, playful sound that had no echo of the dark basement in it. Lucas tossed the ball. Max leaped into the air, catching it with a grace that defied his years, and landed in a pile of autumn leaves. Lucas watched him, a lump forming in his throat. He thought about the lonely boy who had sat in that basement 60 years ago, writing a diary by candlelight, dreaming of a freedom he would never see. He thought about the legacy of love that had survived abuse, time, and concrete. Arthur hadn't been able to save Buddy, but in a way Buddy had saved Arthur's story. And Max had saved them all. You are a good boy, Max, Lucas whispered, the words carried away by the wind. The best boy. Max trotted back, dropped the ball at Lucas's feet and looked up with bright, expectant eyes. He was ready for the next game. He was ready for the ocean. Lucas stood up, leaving the millions of dollars, the legal papers, and the dark history behind him on the porch. He picked up the ball. Go long, buddy, Lucas said, smiling as tears finally ran down his face. Go long. Thank you for making it here with me. Seriously, in a world full of distractions, you chose to spend this time living this story. That means a lot. If it was worth it, a like already makes all the difference. Subscribe so I can keep creating for you. Tell me in the comments, was it worth your time? Every view, every minute watched, every interaction, all of this reminds me why I do what I do. For you, because of you. And if you have someone special in your life who deserves a good story, pass it on. Gift that person a few minutes of emotion.